Before we get into the human smuggling aspect of this, we need to cover a little groundwork. Just review a few details as succinctly as I possibly can. I'll try to make this quick.
Among the largest container ships in the entire world, the Ever Given is roughly the same length of the Empire State Building in New York City, at 400 meters long. And since it's capable of carrying 20,000 cargo containers, it's roughly the same weight as the Willis or Sears Tower is in Chicago. It's truly a colossal ship, and the shortest route for a ship of this size carrying goods from Asia to Europe is through the Suez Canal in Egypt. And it's no wonder why. The alternative of traveling around Africa adds over 10 days of travel time and 3,800 miles to the average ship traveling between China and Europe, which means more money is spent on fuel, crew, and delays in getting cargo to their ports and into the hands of consumers. The ship departed port in Malaysia carrying 20,000 cargo containers full of consumer products destined for Rotterdam, and according to the usual procedure, arrived at the port of Suez in the Red Sea while it awaited entry into the Suez Canal for its journey over to the Mediterranean, where it would afterwards sail along to Rotterdam. The Suez Canal Authority, or SCA, oversees traffic within the canal and, as usual, they place 2 official SCA pilots on board the Ever Given to help its crew travel along the complicated process of getting through the canal.
Okay, please note, this is one of the primary points in time in which somebody, an agency, a country, whoever, could inject personnel into the situation in a very suspicious way. Now, this is the official account, the public narrative of what went down.
Within hours of entering the canal, at approximately 7:30 a.m. local time on the 23rd of March, the Ever Given experienced a freak sandstorm event that obscured visibility aboard. Not only that, but the strong winds from the storm were pushing against the Ever Given's 20,000 cargo containers on top like it was all a giant sail. This ended up causing the ship to lose all ability to steer, pushed the ship sideways, and caused it to ram bow first into the east side of the Suez Canal. This point of the canal is only 200 meters wide, compared to the Ever Given's length of 400 meters. And since it was now positioned sideways, it meant that this entire width of the canal was blocked, which, in effect, meant that the entire Suez Canal system was all of a sudden rendered completely impassable by just a single boat. Now, before we go any further, the Egyptian government has sort of been doing stuff to try and prevent a situation exactly like this from happening. They knew that as cargo ships have been getting bigger and bigger over the years to accommodate growing international demand, that eventually ships would become too big to even get through the narrow Suez Canal. So, they knew in the early 2010s that something had to be done in order to increase the canal's capacity, and so, between 2012 and 2019, the Egyptian government initiated a more than $8 billion plan to expand it by adding additional channels at certain points. This meant that at these points, if a ship got stuck, it could be bypassed by other ships using the newly built adjacent channels. Unfortunately, though, these new secondary channels weren't constructed along the entire Suez Canal's length, and the entire stretch of the canal south of this lake was kept as just a single channel. Well, guess which part the Empire State Building-sized boat just crashed into? Yep, right here in the single-length channel, meaning that it was impossible for any other ships to get around it. Now, every single hour that this ship is stuck there is increasingly catastrophic for the entire global economy. $9 billion worth of goods travel through the canal every day, which means that for every hour the Ever Given is clogging up the canal, it's holding up $400 million worth of international trade. Immediately after the impact happened, 15 other ships who were traveling behind it pretty much immediately found themselves stuck as well. While, at the same time, around 200 more ships were waiting on both the north and south sides for them to clear the mess up before entering. By the end of the weekend following the crash, it was estimated that there would be over 300 ships waiting in line outside of the canal for entry. The worst traffic jam of the 21st century has just happened, and it continues to get worse and worse. More ships are arriving at the Red Sea and Mediterranean ports every single day, and while initially the SCA allowed ships in the Mediterranean to enter and anchor in this sea within the canal, it quickly reached capacity and the entire Suez Canal was shut down for all traffic afterwards.
Once again, I feel compelled to add that this is the official version of how the situation was resolved. It doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. It just means that's the version they want you to believe.
On Sunday, the 28th of March, 5 days after the Ever Given had become trapped, the sun and moon were in alignment and their combined gravity resulted in an exceptionally strong high tide that helped the workers and engineers on the ground to finally be able to yank the ship free on Monday, the 29th of March. After being stuck and blocking one of the world's most vital trade arteries for 6 days, the Ever Given was transported up to the widest section of the Suez Canal up here and placed out of the way so that normal traffic could once again resume. More than $54 billion worth of trade goods were held up or disrupted as an immediate consequence of the Ever Given's incident. A figure...
To reiterate, this ship, which was taking cargo from Asia to Rotterdam, so basically all the way to Europe to very wealthy clients, was stuck in the Suez Canal. It crashed into the side, it wedged itself in, not in any of the areas that had detours, only in the most narrow location where no other ships could bypass it and where it could not be easily freed. It created all sorts of issues, not just with the Suez Canal, not just with the ships behind it, but globally. This had a lot of ramifications. It affected certain markets more than others, and it affected these markets significantly. So, yeah, a lot of people, especially the ones in particular markets, lost a ton of money. They lost a ton of money. I'll get into that in a little while. There's the economic ramifications. But I want to point out something else. It's not just about the money. In this case, it's not just about the money, no matter how much money it is. Think about it. The goods that this Ever Given ship was carrying, all of those 20 to 22,000 shipping containers, never reached their intended destination. They still haven't reached their destination as of, the date of this recording. There's a whole, there's this process that they got to go through, right? There's this auditing process, and they got to get these permits and inspections, and you know how red tape works. Now imagine multiple governments, imagine international laws, and I'll get into that in a little bit, and you'll see. You know how agencies, you know how governments, people in the know, you know how people can manipulate systems, bureaucracies, to their advantage. You know how that can be done. Now, the deep state does this all the time. The satanic cabal, the New World Order, whatever the hell you want to call them. Those fucking guys. All right. They do it all the time. The bad guys do it all the time. Now, the good guys in certain scenarios do it as well against the bad guys. And I do believe that this is one of those situations. I do believe that this was an operation by the White Hats, whatever you want to call them, whatever affiliation you want to attribute them to. This was something that they pulled off. And there's a very dark and compelling reason for them to have done it. This is the story. This is the underground story. You ready? Are you ready? This is the real shit. Okay, all this fucking talking that led up to it, this is the real shit. Okay, so this ship, which has been trafficking children, women, you name it, slaves, primarily from Asian markets to European markets. Okay, the elite, I mean, they all have their little Asian boy or girl. It's just like a thing. I guess it's like a product purse or something. You know, it's status symbol, and it's also the fucking sick culture they grew up in and that they thrive in. It is what it is. Okay, so this ship, among other ships, but this ship primarily, was trafficking these children. And apparently there was a white hat operation. That means there's a military alliance between various countries. The good guys, these good countries, the good people within these good countries, who are not taking shit anymore, who are not going to sit there and listen to another satanic Barack Obama, fucking sending them off to war just for shits and giggles and satanic fucking rituals and, you know, money and gathering. Look, we're not your bitches, okay? We're children of light. We're good people. We're honorable people. Most people on Earth are good people. And you know what? These evil motherfuckers, they're not very many of them. They just happen to rise to the top. All right? And we're done with it. We're done with this shit. Here's the fucking story. SEALs, United States SEALs, U.S. Navy SEALs, purportedly from a group that may be SEAL Team 6 with another name, and Spetsnaz, I believe that's what they're called. It's been a while since I've studied Russian military. It's the Russian Special Forces. They're the equivalent of, you know, whatever we have. And they're the best of the best. All right, I've looked into these guys' military tactics over the years. They're the shit. Okay, and you know, our guys are the shit too. Don't get me wrong. Top of the top, okay? So these guys from Russia and America, these military units, performed this operation. Now, I showed you before the opportunities they had to inject personnel onto the ship. There's more to all that. There's more to that. The story is that there was a nuclear weapon on this ship that would go off if they ever try to get boarded or whatever. You know, it's like a, hey, we know that you know that we're human trafficking, but if you fuck with us, all right. So supposedly the United States Space Force, according to this information that I've gleaned, the United States Space Force jammed the nuclear weapon on the Ever Given, which may account for the strange maneuvering which caused it to ram into the side, or that could have been the personnel that was ejected, or something else. There was also people on board the Ever Given who were working with the Navy SEALs and the Russian Special Forces with this white hat alliance operation group. You know, these people have not stopped doing what they're doing just because some fucking dick twat decided to fucking, you know, steal the presidency. Like, nobody's gonna fucking, you have no legitimacy, Mr. Biden. No legitimacy. The real adults are taking care of the job behind the scenes. So they jammed this nuclear weapon from detonating. And they jammed the ship up in the canal, and they created a situation where they were able to board the ship. Not only that, but they jammed up the rest of the canal so they could board all the rest of the ships. Okay, but there's a lot of variables here. There's a lot of angles. Let's just stay on track here. When they boarded, apparently, due to the information, they had human intelligence. This wasn't just some random shit. This was a setup operation. Okay, this was purposeful. This was planned. So when they boarded this thing and they searched these containers, these 21,000, I said 20 to 22,000 before, but one figure says like 20,000 and 100 something, whatever, okay? 20 something thousand containers. They found 1,245 slaves hidden in these containers. 1,245 living slaves in these shipping containers. Think about it, this ship is bigger than a fucking aircraft carrier, okay? So 1,245 living slaves they rescued from these shipping containers. And tragically, they also found 1,366 dead slaves. They found these bodies. They also found the nuclear weapon and other weaponry, among other things. And it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder about the whole adrenochrome aspect. I wonder if they had any kind of supply on board. Or was it just the raw supply? You know, the kids. Don't know about that. I really don't know. We can only speculate. But that's the information. And you know, it sounded fucking crazy because, look, they always throw the shit at us. They'll throw out some fucking wild stuff, and then they'll have these mysterious tweets that pop up and like, hey, this guy says this or that. I don't know who the fuck that guy is. I'm sorry. I don't know who he is. Okay? Is he credible? I don't know. No clue. I'm not going to rely on him, solely rely on him for my information. You know, information is information, but it's just data. That's pretty much all it is. So, anyway, that's the story, guys. And there's more to it. There's so much fucking more to it. Let's keep digging. Let's dig a little.
Incredible how the unawake and unaware people just think a very long ship with containers on it got blown off course and got stuck. Maybe they think the captain fell asleep, you know, at the wheel. Maybe a mouse got on the steering wheel, the capstan, and spun it round, and, you know, they'll just believe anything, won't they? So here's the situation that all modern ships are by and large computer controlled, and you know, when you fly on an airplane, passenger airplane, it has an autopilot, and a lot of the journey is on autopilot. And so it is with these great long ships that a lot of it is on autopilot, and you know, the human element takes over when either it's a very tricky situation that the computer can't cope with, and that's always comforting to know that the machine has its limitations. You know, docking at port, coming away, and things like that. The captain, he or she would, you know, want to have that. And so it's not that difficult then to understand that, let's just call them the good guys, white hats, of course, cowboy fame, took control of that craft and literally rammed it into the bank. They did so at the narrowest point. We know that Evergreen was the code word for Hillary Clinton when she was in office. We also know that the call sign for that craft was the initials for Hillary Clinton. Call sign was a number of letters and numbers, but they actually, you know, that's quite shocking, but that's a fact. And on the bridge of the ship was the captain and two Egyptian harbour guys, the guys who were supposed to pilot a very big ship, you know, through the canal. So there are three people who should have been in control. And the information I've got is that they were very unhelpful to the authorities, which makes it very suspicious and is one of the reasons that the three have been arrested. It's not been widely reported, but the captain and the two harbour guys who pilot the ships have been arrested. Now, the American naval units worked very closely with the Egyptian government. I can say that although the media didn't cover it, those containers were looked at, you know, and it's well known that trafficking of children, many of them are put in air-conditioned containers, food and water and air-conditioned. They don't want these people to die because they're financially valuable to the cabal. And so lots of children and women have been trafficked in containers. It's for their perspective, it's a good way because it avoids detection. You know, you've got 16, 17, 18,000 containers on one ship. And you're boarded by, so you're going to look through 18,000 containers. So it's a very clever, from their way of doing it. Well, I can say to you that the American Marine units were in position. It was all planned. And, my understanding was that there were some children in those containers. I also understand there were some who didn't make it. This is terribly tragic. It's one of the reasons those 3 people on the ship have been arrested, but that won't be publicly known. Why was it done is a question many people ask. Well, the thing is that, first of all, the good people are looking at every possibility while we're still in this covert operation to try to get information out to anyone who's half awake and half aware. Anyone who's, these brain dead people, they're just not going to see it. But there are a lot of people out there who are waking up. And so it was another 9/11 moment, in the sense that there was an official narrative, which was high winds blew the ship off course, which, if you've been on a boat and you've read the newspapers, then you'll think, how many ships use that? How many times has that happened? How can an experienced captain let that happen? So a lot of people are waking up to that and beginning to understand that there's much more to this. And every day that Evergreen ship was blocking that canal, the cabal lost between $400 and $500 million a day, because they move so much drugs or any products really that are connected to them, that they get their kickback on. So every day that it was off, they were losing 450 to 500 million. And so that's one of the reasons that it was left there for as long as it was, and then it was moved further up, and then again the good guys took control of it and parked it, shall we say. So that's very interesting.
Wondering why the hell I put that picture in my video. Why would I put it in any video? You know what it looks like. You know what it looks like. You know what it looks like. Okay, I left it up there long enough so obviously you can recognize what it looks like. It's a dick pic. It is a penis. It is a male reproductive organ, and it's a big one. It's an image in the sand in the Red Sea. It's the actual lines that were drawn by the ship, the Evergreen ship, Evergiven, as it was on standby, waiting for the pilots, the official SEA pilots, which were going to rendezvous with their ship and guide them into the canal. So they had to wait for 2 hours at the standby point for these pilots to rendezvous with them. And during that course of time, the ship, they had to maneuver it in various ways because there were other ships around them. So over the course of 2 hours, that is the pattern that they made in the sand. Okay, so why does this have any relevance? Is this completely fucking random? For one thing, it's interesting, right? It's interesting. It's weird. I'd want to know about it if I didn't know about it. I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's a good fucking story, but that's weird. Cool. But I do believe it does have a correlation. I think it has an important correlation. A funny one, not so funny for the bad guys. Funny for us analyzing it. It's a cock, right? Right before the ship went into the canal, crashed into the side, and blocked it. It's a cock, then a block. I know this is crude, and I apologize, right? That's not normally my style, but this is part of the story, okay? It's a term, okay? If you're not familiar with what a cock block is when you prevent someone from having sex in whatever way, okay? It's a cock block. Oh, you just cock blocked me. Whatever. Okay, so what happens when you're preventing the bad guys from going through with their sex trafficking? You're preventing their clients from having sex with the slaves. I mean, it's not a funny subject, but you're blocking them. You're cock blocking them, right? You're preventing them from having sex. Now, yeah, it seems like a stretch, right? But it's right before they went into the canal. They drew this shit in the sand. Purportedly, maybe, allegedly, seemingly. They drew the shit in the sand, and then they blocked the canal. Cock block. Sorry I had to cover that. I couldn't avoid it, all right? But that's not the only explanation. Of course, this can be explained away. And during the course of my research, I came across this dude, all right? He's pretty knowledgeable about what he's talking about. I can definitely tell. I've watched enough of his videos. He knows about ships and systems and operations and procedures. And he has an explanation for this, which is not the same one I just gave you, all right? He's brushing this off. Whoo-hoo, conspiracy theory, that can't possibly happen because of this. If you only knew, if you did this. Okay, I'm not saying he's wrong. It's a very plausible justification, but the correlation can't be denied. The correlation cannot be just poo-pooed away. Okay, you can't just throw away this correlation. It's strange. It could be a coincidence. It could be an accident. It could just be nothing, whatever. But nothing, in my opinion, is ever inconsequential in a story of this nature or in life. I mean, these details, God has this universe constructed in a way where all of these details, names, events, occurrences, they all have symbolic meaning. Long ago, people would call them omens. It's something, or it's not. But it's fucking weird and interesting. Here's this guy, Chief, I forgot his name, Mako or something. Chief somebody. Here's his explanation.
Whenever ships approach the vicinity of any port, they are required to call the port control or harbor control. In this case, the Ever Given was scheduled to transit the Suez Canal, so naturally they had communication with the Suez Canal control and requested information about their convoy schedule, which is pretty much standard procedure. Now, during arrival and departure, or basically any maneuvering operations, the ship goes into what is called standby, which means the captain is on the bridge, together with the officer on watch, and the helmsman, which is basically the guy who's holding the steering wheel. The engine room is also manned during this time, so that means the autopilot and any other automatic controls that are available on the ship is disengaged. The ship at this point is controlled manually. So no, the hacking theory to control the ship and draw a dick pic, that's not a thing.
Now, during the course of my videos, if you haven't noticed this already, my conclusions, my understanding of things, they evolve during the progression of my research. And it should. If you encounter new information, you need to alter your understanding, right? So they go into these kind of situations manually. They drive the ship in manually. They operate the ship manually. It's not done with a computer in close quarter situations like this. And they were waiting for the official SEA pilots to accompany them, right? So they were at the rendezvous point waiting for these guys. So even if these were agents or somebody injected into the system, they hadn't arrived on the ship yet. They hadn't got there yet. So the personnel who were operating the ship were the ones operating it, make this picture. They're the ones who made this picture. Now, my information tells me that there were people on board the ship that were working with the Navy SEALs, with the Russian Special Forces, whoever was in charge of this operation. I don't know if, at that point, maybe the entire bridge was already overtaken by these guys. Maybe the good guys had already captured the ship by this point. Dicking around. Yeah, they had to wait 2 hours. They had to wait 2 hours before they could initiate the operation. It makes sense that they'd want to send communication. What else are they going to fucking do? They're sitting there floating around for 2 hours waiting for the rendezvous. So anyway, none of what he says invalidates my argument. in fact, it just, makes it more accurate. It's interesting. There's truth in what he's saying, without a doubt. And yet, the conclusions that he draws lack proper context.
Presumably, they were ordered to maintain position in these coordinates, as that would be their rendezvous point with the pilot boat. Since they were already far from their rendezvous point, they turned the ship around and went back to their designated coordinates. So by now, the pilot boat, Mosahib 2, was already nearby, delivering the pilots to a few more ships. This was when they decided to go in circles in order to stay within the vicinity of their rendezvous point. It's also possible that they didn't want to stop the engine. This is in order to maintain momentum so that when the pilot came on board, the ship can quickly speed up. Now at this point, they could have easily turned to starboard. But as you can see, another ship, the Al Nasriya, was creeping up on their maneuvering space. Adding to that is the Costco Galaxy, which was already maneuvering at the time. So turning to starboard might present a tight spot, while turning to the port side presented a very open ground, easier to maneuver and with no targets nearby. So as you can see, by the time they reached their designated coordinates, the pilot boat was already there, and eventually the pilots came on board the Ever Given at around 5:53 in the morning, Egypt time. All in all, it took about 2.5 hours of trying to maintain their position, which inadvertently led to this image. So, was it intentional? If you've experienced working on board a ship as part of the bridge team, you'll know that maneuvering operations, especially with a lot of traffic around, is very stressful. Fooling around would be the farthest thing from your mind.
The thing that I want to get into on Evergreen, I'm going to actually read some of the intel that I got, so it's direct, and I will translate what I have to, but here is more specifics that I got on Evergreen. Subject, seizure of enemy surface vessels and submarines. And then, of course, also, it's translated into, so sometimes it'll be part of it English, some might be a different language. It could be Sanskrit, it could be Russian, it could be Latin, it could be a lot of different things. And there's a reason why it's written that way, but basically there are hijackings of these ships and submarines going on by the good guys. Now, here's what I got. Notification was received, and it says Commanding Officer Colonel SJD authorizes team's mission statement release. So this was now authorized to release it. I'm bringing it to you. Number 2, interdiction mission, Operation Evergreen, and Joint Special Operation Command actioned. 3, active boarding teams given. So on these teams that were, and this is obviously a joint operation, U.S. Navy SEALs, DevGru, of course you guys know what DevGru is, you SEALs, Spetsgruppe A, and that appears to be Russian special operators, Directorate A of the FSB Special Purpose Center. Again, that's their, I guess you'd call it their new KGB. Let's see, Spetsgruppe V team / KBG Directorate V or 5 Vega Group. Then the next one, the subset of the active boarding teams, is our protection team, and I'm going to leave the number out because I don't know. When it says our protection team, this is Overwatch. So I guess at some level it'll tell you who these people are to a degree and what they're capable of in terms of these type of operations. So our protection team, XYZ, infiltrated Evergreen, already aboard, coordinated strike interdiction mission. So here's what it means. Boarding given, boarding cranes were used, access to Evergreen was given, uploading completed, human intelligence, dead on arrival, 1,366 souls. alive on arrival, 1,245. Therefore, by the time they got there, apparently there were 1,366 people that were dead on that ship, which means we know, as I mentioned the other day, that there were reasons why this operation went this way, shut down the Suez Canal, because, any ship in position for ingress or egress, which is coming in or going out, now can be stopped and boarded and their cargo manifests reviewed, and actually go look for cargo on these ships that actually is not on the cargo manifest. It allowed them to do that legally. And then, of course, what they discover, they can go from there. So that was a planned operation for that reason. One of the reasons is that they basically, there is the shot.
So right after this, he gets into something else. All right, there's something else going on in the ship. There are these Chinese-made vaccines. A lot of them. Okay, and apparently they're called the kill shot. I don't know if that's just something somebody made up. These doses, these vaccines, are supposedly lethal. I don't know if it takes effect immediately or if it takes a while. Probably takes a while. It doesn't make sense that it would just kill you right away. People would stop using them. So yeah, there were a lot of elements to this that goes beyond the human trafficking. This is like, how many birds with one stone? I'm not sure. But all the ships behind them, and think about all the ships around the world, the Evergreen ships that are getting taken out right now. There are reports that this is a global warrant type thing they're serving.